With the Browns offseason, there's always a handful of players that are in a interesting spot with the franchise, right? Especially now as the Browns get better and cap space starts to crunch down a little bit more as you have players you actually are interested in retaining. One of those players that have been brought up that I think it's kind of fair to have this conversation about is David Njoku, who had his fifth-year extension, accepted last year, which is going to hit this year cap-wise. So where does David Njoku land on this spectrum of value and cap space hits? Well, let's talk about it. But before we talk about it, I want to make sure I give a shout-out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. And as always, I start out with Michael Matique, Rob Farron, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, David Roth, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Keith Kirkhack, Brad Calbo, Daylon W, James McGinty, Arenda Hall, Rex Kaufman, Chad Gimme, David Molinado, Andrew Sadejo, Dylan Hill, Josh Mendord, Eric Green, Jaleel Salim Jr., Martha Krusna, Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Bobo Regretti, Anthony O, David Arndt, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Yo-Yo, Fight 3074, Andrew Hirsch, Hundo Magnifico, Paul Wilcox, Curtis Bayer, Batman, Rush Sharir, Barack Kumar, John Alver, Beerman 069, Masayua, Buds of Roland, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, CK, Keith Anderson, Sean Barron, Gakus Pisano, Dom Gazzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Matt Bond, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Soul Train, Charles Work, Billy, Michael Holden Acton, Moose Gentry, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Swift, IT Rex, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Jesus Serrano, Chris Phones, Picktown Brown Backers, Matt Lloyd, Mark Kahn, Max Out Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for that support. It is instrumental to this channel. Now, let's talk about David Njoku and his future with the Cleveland Browns. Now, David's in a weird spot for a number of interesting reasons. David is a very interesting prospect to watch over the years, filled with a ton of potential, was supposed to be one of the best tight ends in his draft class, but always had questions about his blocking ability, always had questions about his consistency catching. And this has kind of been the story of David Njoku, right? Questions about his blocking ability, inconsistencies in his blocking ability, inconsistencies in his ability to catch, and inconsistency in his ability to stay on the field. That is David Njoku's number one issue, right? Is his injuries, his consistency. But he has other issues that clouded this up too. His use. There's just not a great use for him, even if he wasn't injured and very consistent. And then his price. If you get the best of David Njoku in the role that you're asking him to be in, is that worth the price tag that you're going to have to pay for him in 2021? And then you factor in all the variables that come with David Njoku, which is the up and down play, the up and down blocking ability, the up and down consistency, the injury history. All of these things come with David Njoku and makes him a very interesting candidate for somebody who could be on the cutting block as far as roster goes. That's not a bad player, so to say. So let's start to get into some of the main issues with David Njoku. And the first thing is price. With David Njoku, what needs to be understood is that David Njoku, as a tight end in the NFL, is somebody who can be on a lot of rosters, right? I'm not making an argument that David Njoku doesn't have a place or David Njoku is not a good enough tight end to be a rostered member of the Cleveland Browns. That's not an argument that I'm going to attempt to make. What I am saying is intriguing about David Njoku is this interesting place that he sits in, right? The potential is there, but the money's already there when it comes to David Njoku. He's going to have a $6.6 million cap hit, I believe. It's around $5 to $6 million, but it's more than 5. I used to always think it was 5. It went up to like 6 million this year. So that's what his cap hit is going to be in 2020 now. In 2021, my bad. Now, the Browns have the option to cut him and just get $6 million in cap space. They have no dead cap when it comes to him. And again, if we're just talking about David Njoku as a football player, he should be on the team. If we're talking about David Njoku The third string tight end who makes $6 million, well, now that's a more interesting question, right? Because that's what David Njoku is. I understand he came on strong at the end of last season. I understand that some people felt like he was the best tight end by the end of the season, but the reality is with David Njoku, in that every single important metric that would measure who is first, second, and third string, he is always third string. In targets, he's the third tight end. In yards, he's the third tight end. In number of snaps, he's the third tight end. This isn't like Austin Hooper had a clean season where he lived up to expectations and he played every snap. Austin Hooper was hurt times in this season. Harrison Bryant had fumble issues at times and got benched for that. And still, these metrics bear out in this way that David Njoku in this offense is going to be used as the third string tight end. And when you accept that truth, there are a lot of questions with David Njoku that you just suddenly have to ask. You have to ask yourself, is it worth having a tight end on your roster who is taking up $6 million of cap space when you need to fix your defense? You don't need to do really anything to the offense, who A, is not happy in the role that he's in, and B, is not going to find a way to even have $6 million worth of value in the current role that he's in. We can make the argument all the live long day that he's going to outplay his role and he's going to get a bigger role on this team by happenstance. But that's just not realistic. This front office has already invested $10 million in Austin Hooper. They have invested a 4th-round pick in Harrison Bryant. They have really nothing invested when it comes to David Njoku. Yes, they gave him a 5th-year option, but they can wipe their hands of that without any consequence this offseason. They did not draft David Njoku like they did Harrison Bryant, and they did not sign David Njoku. And again, just to put into context how much money $6 million is for a third string tight end, that is money that people play established second string tight ends, not really your third string tight end. Jason Witten made about $6 million with the Oakland Raiders. Eric Ebron makes $6 million with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. Like, that is established 1 or 2 tight end type money. It's not top tier number 1 tight end money. And the reality is, when it comes to David Njoku, how many opportunities is he really going to get to be the second best tight end on this roster when, again, they drafted the guy they want to be the number 2 tight end and they signed the guy they want to be the number 1 tight end? He's kind of stuck in this bind, and it happens a lot with a lot of football players that they just get stuck with the team in one spot because the front office has already chosen 2 other people to be in that spot. Now, whether that's the right or wrong decision, we'll see. But the reality is with David Njoku, even this year, with all the injuries and inconsistencies that was happening at the tight end position in a tight end heavy passing attack, he still was 3rd in targets. He still was 3rd in snaps. He still was 3rd in yards. And that's not an indictment on David Njoku. These things are kind of out of his control, but it is a sobering realization of how he's going to be used this year and next year. He's going to be the 3rd string tight end. And herein lies the issue with doing anything with David Njoku, because I hear this all the time about trade rumors with David Njoku. And I just don't think people are seeing this from other teams' perspectives clear enough to why David Njoku really has minimum, like zilch trade value to other teams. Because look, we in Cleveland have watched David Njoku for 3 years. We see the potential, we see the athleticism, we see all of this stuff, and we can tell ourselves and sell ourselves that David Njoku has trade value. That's reasonable for somebody who has watched this team and has an invested interest in the young players that they draft. I'm not knocking you for believing that David Njoku has potential or value, but you have to look at this from another team's perspective. David Njoku has underperformed every single season he's been in the NFL. That's just the truth. He has not overperformed at all at any point in his NFL career. He has not had a 1,000-yard season. He's not had an 800-yard season. He's coming off a season, 2 seasons in fact, where he barely got over 200 yards. And he's due up, if you trade for him, for $6 million. That is a real gamble to take, just regardless of anything else that might come after that. That doesn't make a lot of sense for other teams. Like, if David Njoku were on another team, we would not be trying to trade for David Njoku as Cleveland Browns fans. Just that we know David Njoku, we've watched David Njoku, so we see the potential, but he really has no trade value. And then you add on top of all of those things going against him, the fact that he has a $6 million cap hit that has $0 in dead money. And this is why the Texans weren't able to trade J.J. Watt, is because the lack of dead money on the cut. So teams know you're just going to cut him and get cap relief. Why in the world would I pay the price that he's already due to be paid? I'll just let the market deal with that. And that's what they're going to do with David Njoku. David Njoku is not going to make $6 million on the open market. David Njoku is not going to make $6 million on the open market, which means that if you're a team that wants David Njoku, you should probably wait and see if he gets cut or just draft a young tight end. That's kind of the mindset and the process for a lot of other teams. Now, you might agree with me, you might disagree with me, but I tend to think that this is the more accurate way that people are looking at David Njoku as a trade asset from the outside looking in. So again, I see the trade rumors out there about David Njoku. I just don't think they're realistic, because why would another team from their perspective want to trade for David Njoku when he hasn't really done anything in the NFL worth trading for? I get he's a former first round pick, but a lot of former first round picks get released every year in the NFL. So that really doesn't mean anything, especially when you're talking about 3-4 years after he got drafted. So that kind of just takes all of the momentum out of any trade that you're going to do with David Njoku, because I don't think anybody's going to take that salary for a guy who has not had that much production in his career. Now, I don't want to make this sound like I'm getting all negative on David Njoku, so I'll get into some of the points to where there is a argument to keep him on the roster, and that is because David Njoku probably at his peak is the most athletic tight end you're going to have on a roster. If you have a jump ball situation, you literally have no other receiver that is as capable and athletic and as big or as much as a red zone threat as David Njoku. Austin Hooper, not the same athlete, good size. Harrison Bryant, we know about his issues that he needs to fix. And then all of your wide receivers are like literally under 6'2". So you don't have a big red zone target if you're the Cleveland Browns. And David Njoku right now currently is that. So if you look at David Njoku as a hybrid tight end and wide receiver, maybe you can convince yourself that they should keep him on the roster. But the issue that I've run into with thinking of David Njoku like this, because this is what I have thought of him for the last 2 years, is that no team uses him like that. The Browns have just not used him like that. So how can I view him in a way on this team that they don't view him in? So they're not going to put him out wide. They're not going to do the wide receiver red zone stuff with them. So it's kind of tough to look at him this way. Now, his abilities as a blocker, they seem to have improved this year. He had some much better blocking numbers coming out of this season. He was a much better blocker this season than he's ever been. And he does produce. Like, he's athletic enough to get open in the NFL. He can make some catches. If you get him on a screen, he can be pretty dangerous. And he is a nice weapon to have there. The question isn't, can David Njoku add anything to your football team? The answer to that is yes. The question more is what David Njoku adds to this football team worth $6 million? And that's where you start to go, probably not, right? $6 million, that could be a new slot corner. That can be, half of what you're going to pay a new safety. That could be half of what you're going to pay a new defensive end to put alongside Myles Garrett. And I think all three of those positions being filled adequately would be more important than making sure that you have a third tight end, especially with the roster that the Browns have on the offensive side of the ball. It's just not lacking for options. It doesn't make sense to hold another option at $6 million when you really don't need to. I'm just wondering, from the Browns' point of view, what is the argument to keep him at $6 million if you can dump him and not take a cap hit this year? Like, I want to know. Because, look, I'm not one of these people who are going to sit here and say, oh, the Browns need to save cap space. They need to do these things for cap space. I think that's a little overrated. The NFL teams find ways to manufacture cap space all the time. And I have heard all kind of wild suggestions for the Browns to find a few $1 million here, right? Trade Odell to save money on cap, even though it wouldn't really save you that much money, or the money that people think it would save you, or restructure Jarvis Landry to save a handful of $1 million, or even, like some people say, like trade Jarvis Landry to save some money in the cap. And I just don't think the cap's at that dire of a point that you need to do those things. And if you're looking to save a few $1,000,000, there is a $6 million gift looking at you in your third string tight end with no cap hit if you want to save it. It just doesn't seem like it's very functional to pay him that much to be the third string tight end. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think the Browns should keep David Njoku, his cap's hit, and just roll the dice with it? Or do you think that money would be better spent somewhere else, maybe on the defense? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.